Talked for 6 months about our guest being here tonight. I first met Ron LaClair at the Compton Traditional Rendezvous several years ago. The first year we hit it off. The next year we became friends, and next year we became very good friends. And we found out that's because we have so many similar interests. We've been together all weekend. We did a radio show this morning, and you're just going to love hearing Ron LaClair's stories. Before he comes up here, I want to tell you, this guy is the real deal. He has roots all the way back there in those old stories that we all like to talk about, the good old days. He makes a fine bow with the Super Shrew Bow Company. And before I talk anymore, I'm going to bring him on up to Mr. LaClair.
As Jim said, we met several years ago and hit it off, and we like a lot of the same things. We're both good singers, except I don't play the guitar. But when Jim told me about your organization down here and asked me to come down, I was real flattered. I said, well, is that the best you can do? Why don't you get somebody like G-Thread? Or, He said, no, Ron, I want you, because I want you to tell them the old hunting story. So I'll tell you a few of those and how I got started in traditional archery. But first off, I want to thank all of you for the warm welcome, how you've treated Nancy and I, and made us feel just like family. And one of the young lads there, what's his name, Mason? That's you right there. He came up to me and he said, Mr. LaClair, he said, do you do any napping? And I said, I sure do, but I missed my nap this afternoon. He gave me a strange look there for a minute, and then he got it. But anyway, I'll start out by telling you how I got started in traditional archery or archery. It's only been traditional archery for the last couple decades. When I was a young boy, 5 years old, and I want to tell you that was a long time ago, back before television, when all they had was radio, and mothers used to read stories to their children. My mother read the story of Robin Hood to me, and it just struck a chord somehow in me, and it just lit a fire, and I had to have a bow and arrow. I was only 5 years old, so my dad made me a wooden bow and some arrows, and I run around the yard playing Robin Hood. There was a boy down the street, or down the road a little while later, that he got a real bow and arrow set, and he was probably 10, 12 years old, or maybe older, I don't know, but I followed that guy around like a little puppy dog, watching him shoot that bow and arrow around the fields. And it was just something that stuck with me all my life. I felt just like this little kid that just discovered archery, and I still do, and that's what I love about it. When I was 11 years old, I had to think there for a minute, I won my first archery award at summer camp. My folks didn't have a lot of money, but they sent me to a real nice summer camp one year. And they had a lot of activities. You signed up for. They had horseback riding, riflery, canoeing, swimming, woodcraft, archery, and so I signed up for all that stuff, and then signed up for archery. Well, I remember we used to shoot at a big 48-inch target, multicolored target, probably from I think 20 yards, and I shot this bow, and every time I'd go to this class, I'd shoot this same bow. And it was really a dark colored bow, kind of a round English style bow. And as I think back now, it was probably Osage, and it was lightweight because I was 11 years old. But I just loved shooting that bow. And got to the point where when the 1 hour class was over, I wouldn't leave. I stayed till the next class came, and I'd shoot with them. And the next class came, and I'd shoot with them. And the next class came all day long. All I wanted to do was shoot the bow and arrow. Found out later from my dad told a story. He said the camp director called me at home long distance, and that was a big deal back then, long distance phone calls. Said, your son doesn't want to do anything but shoot the bow and arrow. And my dad says, well, then let him shoot the bow and arrow. So that's what I did the whole time I was there. I did go to the swimming classes once in a while because I liked that. But that's how infatuated I was with it, and that's how strong it was in me. When I was 16, I remember I bought a Pyrex aluminum bow out of a secondhand store. And by that time we moved off the farm and into town, and I didn't really have a place to shoot, but there was a railroad track there. I used to walk down the railroad track and shoot arrows into the telephone poles. So it was just, archery was a big part of my life, all my life, and then when I got I think 1955, I started bow hunting. It was the first year I bought a license and started bow hunting. And I'll never forget my first day in the woods with a bow. It was a 1955 Bear Kodiak, 52 pounds. Wood arrows, I don't remember what kind of broadheads I had, but I just went out in the woods and sat down on a log. And pretty soon here come a deer. And I saw this deer and it was coming my way, and I started getting excited. Then I started shaking, and the deer got closer. I started shaking really bad. When the deer got close enough for me to shoot, I was shaking so hard that that arrow went somewhere, but I had no idea where. It's probably still up there in the woods somewhere. But then I met a fellow that at work that was older than I, and I didn't know at the time how involved in archery he had been, but he heard that I was a bow hunter. So he kind of took me under his wing, and we went out to a local range and did some shooting together. And then he invited me to come down to an archery tournament at Detroit Archers in Michigan. And so I went with him, and we were walking down alongside this building, and I can see it like it was just yesterday. This man was walking toward us. It was Fred Bear. I'd seen pictures of Fred before, but I'd never seen him in person. So as he came toward us, I nudged Carl and said, Carl, there's Fred Bear. Carl just smiles, yeah. And as we got closer, and Fred's eyes looked over and met Carl's, he says, Carl, how are you? And he walks over and stuck his hand out and shook hands. Come to find out, they were good friends, and they were both charter members in the Michigan Bow Hunters. And Carl introduced me to Fred Bear. And I want to tell you, after that, Carl grew about 6 inches for me, because I thought, I am a friend of Fred Bear. So that was my first time meeting Fred. I saw him many times after that down the road, because he was always at all the events, most of the events in Michigan. And got ahead of myself a little bit. About the year before that, about 1957, I was a single guy, and I was dating, looking for my soulmate, and found out that most girls weren't interested in talking about hunting. Bows and arrows didn't impress them. So, but one day I met this girl, cute little redheaded girl, and started talking to her about hunting. And she just warmed right up, we started talking back and forth. Then she told me that she was real familiar with archery because her first cousin, Jack White, was the national champion, 1953 national champion field archer. So anyway, long story short, our first date I took her to see Old Yeller. They'd just come out. The second date I took her ice fishing. Most girls would want to go off the lake, about 10 minutes after they got out on there, but we stayed out there and ice fished all afternoon. Then shortly after that, I bought her a bow, a little 39-pound semi-reaper, they called it back then. Got her some arrows, and she lived in a apartment above a doctor's office in town, in Lansing, in town. There was no place to shoot, but they had a garage at the end of the driveway. So I put her up some hay bales, and she used to stand down on the sidewalk and shoot up the driveway into the garage with the hay bales. So anyway, I figured, well, this is the gal for me. So we got married February 28, 1959, and that was 49 years ago, just this last month. And we went on our first bow hunt together that year in Upper Michigan. We didn't have a lot. We borrowed her uncle's 9x9 umbrella tent. We borrowed sleeping bags. We borrowed Coleman cook stove. We borrowed most everything we had except our bows and arrows and clothes on our back. And went up there and camped out in the woods and hunted for a week. We didn't know much about bow hunting. I still didn't then. And we saw a lot of deer, but you usually saw the tail end of them as the flags were going through the woods. But Nancy has been my bow hunting partner. She hasn't missed a fall hunting. Have you, honey? She's hunted with me every year since 1959, so she's my #1 bow hunting partner. Then I'll tell you a little story about Nancy's first deer. We were hunting on state land in northern Michigan, and back then there was no tree stands. They weren't legal. Nobody baited. You didn't know what bait. Bait was for fishing. So we would just go out and we would find runways. The deer were moved from the bedding areas, from the cedar swamps up into the hardwoods. And we'd build brush blinds along the trails. So I built her a blind pretty close to the trail, probably 10, 12 yards. And I told her, I said, now honey, I said, the deer are going to come out of that cedar swamp down there, and they're going to come up this trail, and they're going to walk right by you here. And I had her sitting on a stool, a folding stool, and so that she was down below the blind, like this. And I said, now let the deer go past. And then when you, after they go past, I said, stand up and shoot over top of the blind. So she's sitting there, she told me this story later. Here comes some deer out of the swamp. They come up the trail, they walk past her. She stood up and the stool squeaked. And away they went. So she waited a little while, pretty soon here comes some more deer. I think that happened twice, didn't it? Here comes some more deer, same thing. She let them go by, she stood up, squeaked, and away they went. So finally, here come a couple more deer, and it was a little yearling doe in the back. And she said, well, if I stand up, the stool's going to squeak. So she tried to pick a hole in the blind. She shot right through the blind. And I don't know if she hit the blind, deflected her or what, but she hit that deer right in the middle of the ham. Tell you a little bit about her bow. Was a 25-pound at 24-inch bear polar, ladies polar. And I had a bear razor head on there with a cedar shaft without the insert. And the deer ran out to about 80 yards, turned around, looked at her, and just dropped right there. So that was her first deer. My first deer, which I got before she did. I was hunting in the same area, the state land, and I started bow hunting in 1955, and I didn't kill my first deer until it took me 7 years, because there was no books, there was no videos, there was no tree stands, there was no baits, there was no seminars. You learned the hard way. So I was sitting out there in the woods, and I found this nice little tree close to the cedar swamp, so I sit down on my hind end, and I noticed that, gosh, here's a deer trail right here. I didn't know it was that close, but well, I'm here, I'll just stay here because I'm comfortable. Pretty soon here come a deer out of the and she comes up over the hill. She's about 12 or 15 yards out there, and she stops and she sees me. And I've got this 66-inch recurve Bear Kodiak Special, 60 pounds. So I kind of drew the bow horizontally. I don't know if I got full draw or what, but I got it back and I let it go. The deer whirled at the shot, the arrow caught it in here. Ended up, it was a liver shot, but we trailed it a long ways back into the cedar swamp and found the deer. And my partner was Carl, the guy that got me started and introduced me to Fred Bear. And when we found the deer, I let a war whoop out of me. And Carl says, well, we might as well go home. He says, you've scared all the deer out of the county. There won't be no more around. But anyway, the hunting back then was, there wasn't a lot of bow hunters, and but there were a lot of deer, at least in the areas that we hunted. Then when I got into organized archery, I joined an archery club and started shooting tournaments, field archery tournaments, which was a lot of fun. And I'm a little competitive where I used to be, and so I practiced hard and got really good at it. And so all through the 60s, I shot competition archery. And I started out shooting bare bow, and then the real competition was in freestyle with sights. So I went that way and I got the sights on the bow. Went to Cobo Hall, shot in the International Indoor Open, shot on the Michigan team along with some real great shooters of the day. Dickie Roberts was the national champion in 1966. In 1966, I went to the state championships in Michigan. We shot 3 rounds, a field round, the first 28 targets, a hunter round, the second 28 target, and an animal round the next day. Anyway, after the first 28 targets, I was leading the field. I was the number 1. After the second round, Dickie Roberts had come up and tied me, so we were tied for first and second place. So we went home that night, and I didn't sleep very well that night. The next morning, I'm standing on the number 1 target with Dickie, and he tried to psych me out. He looked at me and he said, "Ron," he says, "you know, when I won the Nationals last year," he said, "I shot a perfect animal round." I said, "Yeah, I know, Dickie." And he said, "And I'm going to do it again today." And I said, "Well," I said, "you're going to have to if you want to beat me." So naturally, he did. He shot a perfect round. Unbelievable guy. The guy just, the harder the competition, the harder he shot. He was just that kind of guy. He was just unbeatable when the chips were down. But anyway, I didn't fret much about being beaten out by a couple of points by a national champion. So, let's see where am I? My first bear hunt was Upper Peninsula of Michigan in 1964. And I went with another fellow up there. At the time, I had just gotten a brand new Kodiak, bear Kodiak bow, was 70 pounds. And I had some forged wood arrows. I know a lot of you know what forged woods are. And Zwicky broadheads. And I thought, boy, when I see this bear, it's going to go through him like a hot knife through butter. And my buddy was a big guy. He's bigger than me. But he shot a little 45-pound bow, and he shot with pins. So I kept razzing Bob all the way up there about, you know, I said, that bow of yours is going to bounce right off that bear. And I said, mine's going to go through him like a hot knife through butter. And he just grinned, you know. So we got up there, and I remember when I got my chance at my bear, I got a good broadside shot, about 18 yards, and that arrow hit right on the shoulder. The bear took off, and after about 2 bounds, the arrow dropped out. Left the broadhead in there, but the shaft just fell out. And we looked and looked, and of course we didn't find the bear. Well, then the next day, Bob got his chance, and his little 45-pound bow took it behind the ribs, angled up into the lungs, and the bear went about 40 yards, and that was it. That was a long trip home. Because he never let up on me. In about 1970 or thereabouts, something happened to the archery world. The compound came along. And everybody the archery world went crazy. 1 minute archery was fun and everything like it had been for years, and the next thing you know, that everybody is shooting these machines. And to me, a guy that had been started and influenced by stories of Robin Hood and Fred Bear and people like that, those things they had no romance. They had no history. They had no meaning to me. So I dropped out of archery, organized archery, that is. I didn't quit shooting or quit hunting for quite a number of years. And finally, it was in 77 or 78. Some of you may have been in this long enough to remember the magazine that came out of Tucson, Arizona, the Longbow Shooters Digest. Anybody remember that magazine? Anyway, there was a guy named Harvey Overshiner that published a magazine called the Longbow Shooters Digest. It was all about longbows. Well, I had read the book of Howard Hill in 1964 and always had a fascination for longbows. Plus, that was a Robin Hood type bow too. So I called Howard Hill Archery, the only place around at the time where you could get a longbow. And they said, we got a 6 months wait. 6 months, oh gosh, I can't wait 6 months. What do you got in stock that's left-handed? And Betty Eakin, Craig's mother, said, we've got an 85-pound Big 5. I said, whoa, 85 pounds, I can't shoot that out. Let me think about it, I'll call you back. So I went and got my, I had a 50-pound recurve, and Nancy had a 35-pound Red Wing Hunter, and I strung them both up, and I grabbed a hold of both of them, and I grabbed both strings. It's 85 pounds, right? And I got it back to my face, and I thought, whoa, I can pull 85 pounds. So I called Betty back, and I said, I'll take it in a dozen arrows. Well, when the bow came, took it out of the box, and just a beautiful thing, you know. And I don't remember how I got it strung, but I did. I got it strung, and I went out in the backyard to my target, and I shot 4 arrows, and I couldn't get the 5th one back. So I shot 4 arrows, and I go down and get them, come back, and by that time the blood had run back down into my arms, and I could shoot 4 more. So I got that bow about mid-September, and our bow season started on the 1st of October, and on the 7th of October I killed my first deer, a nice little 7-point buck with my 85-pound hornbill longbow. And that's when the longbow started for me. And I was having so much fun with it. I thought, boy, there's a lot of people really missing out here. You know, there's something that archers, this is what they ought to be shooting. So Nancy and I started going back to the tournaments, to the shoots around the state, and to some of the shows. Anderson's Archery Clinic had a big event every year that drew a bunch of dealers and people. And we just started putting out a table of longbows and literature. I bought 100 magazines from Harvey, the Longbow Shooter's Digest, and I would sell them at the tables. I made up a video. I think I was one of the first ones to use a TV monitor at a show, and I did this at Anderson's. I rented some Howard Hill shorts, put them up on a screen, and I had one of the first video cameras around that they used to set up on your shoulder, and you had a power pack hung down here. And I videotaped the Howard Hill shorts on this screen, put them together in a little package and narrated a little bit, took it to the shows, and there was some Kembo and some of Howard shooting stuff out of the air, and I would show this at the shows. People would stop and they would look at that stuff, and it just fascinated them. One of the people that got hooked by that was Jerry Brown of Great Northern Longbows. Jerry come by my booth, and he stood there and he watched Howard shoot. Never said a word, looked at the bows, walked away. 10 minutes later, he's back, looking again. A few minutes, he walked away. 20 minutes later, he's back again. And I said, would you like to shoot one of these? He said, yeah. He says, I'm left-handed. I said, well, I got a left-handed one here. So we walked over to the practice target there, and Jerry took a shot, and he'll tell you this story if you ever talk to him about it. His first shot was right in the bullseye. His eyes got big, and he looked at me and he said, whoa, that was fun. And I had a deal with Anderson's. I couldn't sell those there, and I'd already started my archer shop, my business in 1980, and I was buying bows from Tim Miggs and Howard Hill Archery, and trying to get people involved in my area. So Jerry came over to my shop, which was at the time in the house, and ended up going home with a brand new longbow. Shortly after that, Jerry owned a hardware. Shortly after that, he sold his hardware, and with Rick Shepard went into building bows full time. So for 30 years at least, I've been promoting traditional archery and longbows. In 1981, I met a fellow named Fred Trost who was starting an outdoor program called Michigan Outdoors. And he came up to my table and he told me about his show and what he was going to be doing. And he said, I hear that you shoot stuff out of the air with that bow. And I said, yeah, sometimes. And he said, can I get you to come out here in the field and we'll do a little demonstration? I can get it on a video camera. And I said, yeah, okay. So I had a friend of mine go out there and we had some discs and stuff. And he did a little interview on tape. He wanted me to tell him about the longbows and stuff. And I threw up some big discs and shot them out of the air. Then I got to telling him about Howard Hill. Now, Howard Hill used to shoot coins out of the air. He said, coins? With a longbow or with an arrow? And I said, yeah. He said, have you ever done that? And I said, well, I've tried it once in a while. And so he taught me into trying it on camera. And the second shot, I hit a quarter, or was it a quarter, half dollar, I can't remember. Hit a coin out of the air. You could hear it when it clanged it. Anyway, that impressed Fred, and he had me on his show several times. And he's the guy that was actually the instigator of getting the longbow organization going in Michigan. He kept saying, Ron, he says, you've got to get an organization started. You've got to get, you've got these people that are interested now. You've got to get them together and get something going. So in 1983, by that time I'd gotten enough people together and we started a Michigan Longbow Association with just a handful of members, probably less than what you guys got here. And that organization is still going today. Here is their 25th anniversary issue of Stick Talk. And I'm very, very proud of the fact that an organization that I was involved in and got started is still going. And this, remember, is not just traditional archery. This is longbows, wood arrows. And we got the Great Lakes Longbow Invitational going in 1985, and that's been going every year since. So, in some of the people that I've met in my time in traditional archers are some of the most wonderful people in the world. But I've met some really, really fine folks. I'll never forget meeting Jay Massey. I had read Jay's books and really admired his writings and everything that he'd done with in traditional archery, hunting moose in Alaska. And it was our second Great Lakes Longbow Invitational. We invited Dickie Roberts and Jay Massey to come to the Great Lakes Longbow shoot. And they showed up, and I saw Jay standing over there, and I walked over toward him, and he turned around, and I said, Jay, I'm Ron LaClair. And stuck my hand out, and he said, Ron LaClair. He says, I've heard so much about you. And then it was just, Jay was such a genuine person. He was the kind of a guy that never blew his own horn. He had just had an interest in people, and I admired him more than anyone I think I've ever known in archery. Later on, Jay and I were doing a show at Anderson's together, and the Michigan Longbow Association had a booth, and Jay had some literature there. He was telling about he was booking hunts for Alaska, and he was selling books, and it was real crowded on a Saturday, and they had us on asphalt, and Jay had been on his feet for hours talking to people. It was just people just kept coming and coming and talking and talking. Finally, later on in the afternoon, we had a lull, and there was nobody there. So I sat down, we had a couple chairs behind us. I sat down, I said, Jay, I said, come on, take a load off. So he sits down, and he hadn't sat down 10 seconds. And I said something like, feel good to take a load off your feet. Oh yeah, and he said, and then two young kids, a boy and a girl walked up, and they were probably about 11, 12 years old. And they started looking at Jay's pictures. He jumped right up, got up there and started talking to them, asking them all kinds of questions. You shoot a bow, and what's your name, and this and that. He just kept pumping for information. And then they would ask a question about this or that, and he stood there talking to them for several minutes. And they were getting ready to go, and he said, just a minute. And he reached over and he took 2 copies of 1,000 Campfires, signed them to them, their name, J. Massey, and handed them those books. And I've often wondered, I'd like to know those kids, or where they are now and what they've done, what that meant to them at that time. But it showed me a part of J. Massey that I really, like I say, I really admired. He was such a genuine person. I got to meet Glenn St. Charles at one of the PBS banquets, and he talked to me, took me aside and asked me my opinion about a traditional record-keeping organization. That's eventually what Glenn is the one that got the ball rolling on that, and that's how Compton came about. And well, I've skipped the part about Shoe Haven. Am I running over time here? You guys getting bored? I'll tell you just a little bit about Shoe Haven because Jim wanted me to talk about that. Got a little piece of property in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan that is just so dear to my heart, and I just love it up there. I say we, myself and 2 other hardwood floors, tamarack logs, vertical logs. Bought the cabin for $3,000, which I thought was a steal because I couldn't build it for that, and had it moved by some movers into the location where I wanted it, right on the bank of the Armstrong Creek. And first thing we did is put a new tin roof on it and fixed it all up, and we go up there every year. I say we, myself, and there's 6 of us, 6 or 7 that go up there every year and bow hunt. And on my website, there's this little piece that I wrote about Shoe Haven. Nestled in a secluded valley, far off the beaten path, on the banks of a small stream, was a little cabin called Shoe Haven. Originally built in 1936, this rustic pine cabin was only recently moved to its current location. The original intent was just to have a hunting camp, a place to hang your hat and your bow. But Shoe Haven has become more than that, much more. Shoe Haven has revealed itself an enchanting environment where the bow hunting experience is enhanced tenfold. It is a place of peace and tranquility, a place where a person can recharge their spirit, feed their soul, and share wonderful times with fellow bow hunters.
The ghost of Armstrong Creek. Armstrong Creek is a special place where whitetails get real old. No one ever goes there, for it's haunted, so we're told. Years ago, a man named Armstrong came to pan for gold. Hostile Indians took his scalp and left him naked in the cold. They say his ghost is still around, that he's looking for his hair. Now, most folks believe the story, and no one ever hunts there. Well, I don't believe in ghosts and such. My blood's not made of milk. I just know there's bucks in there with horns as big as elk. Come this weekend, I'll be there, just me with my stick and string. No ghost is going to scare me off. I'm going to do my thing. Saturday morning in pre-dawn light, I crept along the creek. The smells were old. I heard a noise. I felt my knees go weak. A monster buck suddenly appeared through the trees upon a rise. I drew my bow. The cedar shaft flew just like it had eyes. The buck was down. His rack was huge. I need help to get him out. I turned to leave, but something made me stop and turn about. There he stood, beside my buck. He was ghostly, pale and thin. His scalp was gone. His naked body wore nothing but a grin. I was frozen in my tracks. I couldn't move or speak. I was standing face to face with the ghost of Armstrong Creek. He spoke to me. The sound was strange, like nothing I'd heard before. "Good shot, old coon," he said to me. I thought he might say more, but he turned and vanished in the shadows. My legs suddenly found life. I flipped that buck upon his back and pulled my hunting knife. A slash, a pull, his guts were out. I grabbed him by a horn. 200 pounds of whitetail pulled as easy as if newborn. Now there's more big bucks back in there, boys, but they're not for the meek. If you think you're brave, my friend, try hunting Armstrong Creek.